across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You did. Yep.
Oh, we thought we were going to get Eborn on the microphone.
Is it Dr. Roger Givolb again?
No, you're right. Dr. Roger Givolb, we can always force into accidentally going over the break and accidentally saying something.
Dr. Andrew Giborn.
No, nothing's an accident. Everything's deliberate. This is what people love, actually. It's those moments in between.
Right. You don't exist until I've introduced you.
How
long have you been in
Back in your box, behave yourself.
Because what's happening? Remember, I know you're here.
Oh, I don't.
Asher knows that you're here.
Oh, no, then.
Chloe knows you're here. The viewers and listeners do not know you're here.
I do now.
They do, because they heard him at the start of coming out the ad break. Yeah.
Hey.
Okay. Joining us in the studio is the barrister and futurist, an all-round good egg, Andrew Eborn.
What a shock! What a horror! It's so good to be back.
Oh, don't do that.
What? I love break the fourth wall. The most important people are there. I love it. The reason I do this show is because you're brilliant listeners and viewers around the world, and this is what they do.
Right,
I love it.
You were spotted, by the way, and we want to know what you were doing with Tim Davie, the boss of the BBC.
I was with Tim Davie.
Why? Not you as well.
No, I was there last night because I did the podcast. You did ask. I was there. I would do the podcast for the Royal Television Society. And yesterday we had good traitors. I love that. I love this sort of stuff. And so I was there yesterday, and it was a glorious, a really harrowing event. Actually.
No expense spared, I bet.
It was. So was it glorious or harrowing?
Both.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, it's all
I suppose like the Somme.
Yes.
Glorious and harrowing.
They're obviously releasing a lot of documentaries about the Holocaust and things like that. And we went to go and see this. It's about the music in Auschwitz. Right. And it was a BBC programme which is coming out very, very soon. And that's what it was for.
Yeah, they had bands. If you could play something, you didn't get gassed.
Yes, that's right. So, absolutely horrendous.
Great music. And on the way to the gas chambers, they play Mozart and stuff.
It was absolutely... It was harrowing. And they had
that wasn't in order to goad them, that was in order to delude them, wasn't it, to the victims?
But they also had bands for the commandants there.
They did. They had about 8 bands, and this is what they talked about. And basically they would ask if you could play something, you survived. And what was the harrowing moment? Somebody's just about to turn 100, I think one of them. Somebody who could play the cello on that sort of basis. So that's what it was. That was the event.
Right. I don't want to be awful, but I can play the triangle. I don't think that doesn't count, does it? But can I ask you this question? You're talking about all these programmes about the Holocaust.
Yes.
I look, you know how on YouTube you can see which bits people watch the most of.
Yes.
And if you go to Holocaust documentaries, you know, you can see the macabre people, if you like, who deliberately want to see all the worst bits. To what extent is it, I mean, I know what Asher's going to say, anything that gets the word out is important, but is there an argument that sometimes we go too far with all this stuff?
The problem
you wouldn't always say that.
No, but the problem is this, is we get, unfortunately, all these reports throughout all the media desensitised, and we must never let that happen. When you personify it, when you say this is an individual, this is a family, these are the people who are connected, that's how people relate to it. When things are just numbers,
people want it to happen again. They watch it and go, "Oh, good, let's do that again."
That's what we need to call out, and you're brilliant at calling that all the time.
But I think some people like it because for the same reason they like horror movies. By the way, I'm surprised at what you said. I'll tell you the reason I thought you'd go slightly different on this, because do you remember when they had that very crass and insensitive advert for people to go and see Auschwitz on the trip to Krakow? Your view at that point was, even if people are going just for the notoriety of the place, at least they see it and understand it.
I went to Auschwitz. I saw it when I was in Poland, and it was just when Schindler's List came out. So beforehand, with a whole load of Polish people, we watched Schindler's List. I was in tears at the end. It's one of the most dramatic things.
Oh, God, yeah.
No, but it's because what happens is they take the... Have you seen Schindler's List? So you see the thing, and at the end, they start showing the real people.
Oh, yeah, that's...
And then afterwards, the following day, I went to Auschwitz, and it's horrendous. And it's only when you sort of walk around there and you see the shoes, you see the other bits and pieces.
God.
The hair.
It's absolutely disgusting.
Have you seen? I can't remember the name of it. It's an Iranian-backed charity, I believe, here in the UK that has contacted nearly 500 councils and universities telling them to boycott Holocaust Memorial Day this year.
Wow.
Yeah, because they want to include Gaza in it.
Yeah, on the basis that it's wrong of them to only talk about one genocide on Holocaust Memorial Day and not make half of it about Gaza.
Which wasn't a genocide, which isn't a genocide.
I mean, actually, that's a slight problem. I hate, Chloe, this sloppy language where people go, what is going on in Gaza is a genocide.
Well, they do it on purpose. It's not sloppy. They're doing it for a reason.
Whether you are in favour or against the operation, or whether you want to call it a war or a military operation, it is not a genocide.
What Hamas did was a genocide.
A genocide is where you wipe people all out, and the aim of the project is to wipe people out based on their religion, ethnicity, or whatever. What is happening in Gaza is civilians are being killed whilst the Israelis are trying to get Hamas.
It's urban warfare, and armies around the world are studying it to see how Israel are killing so few innocent civilians.
The reality is, whatever your political views and whatever side you're sort of supporting, if you like, any loss of life is horrendous.
Well, of course.
And so I would absolutely, and this is what drives it home. And it wasn't just the Jews who were murdered.
No,
there were others, and that's why it's important. And each and every one of those, it's a human life. And where I come from, my only objective is about peace and to make sure that we do.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I think's important, and I just want to be clear for anybody listening so there's some balance. Look, it is perfectly legitimate to be very, very strongly opposed to what Israel's done in Gaza. The fact that they've said there are human shields being used by Hamas and we're going to attack anyway. You can be critical of that, but that doesn't make it a genocide.
Yeah, right? I think there's a legal definition, and you look at that sort of side, correct, and you go back to the reasons for it and so on and so forth. The reality is it's human life.
Of course.
And if you look at that sort of basis, it's horrendous. And the arguments on both sides, it is.
Yeah, horrendous. But the media have colluded with Hamas just pumping out their propaganda. They just go 40,000 people have died, neglecting to say 20-odd thousand were
in this country.
And the first, we always say, the first casualty in war is the truth. And what we need to do is shine a spotlight, work out actually what did happen, and then turn around. And we always say, we'll make sure it never happens again. But it keeps on repeating itself.
I've no problem whatsoever in people criticising Israel and Israel's strategy. I mean, I've said myself, I think that they've performed pretty disastrously in many respects. But doesn't make it a genocide. That's what drives me bananas.
But it's, as I say, it's a legal definition.
Yes.
You look at that sort of basis, you look at the whole history of it, about the Nazis and so on and so forth, why that came out, and you then talk about the International Court of Human Rights and all those sort of things. The reality is, go back to the principle, is people have died unnecessarily.
I'll tell you one thing.
That's war, isn't it? That happens.
I'll tell you one thing. I think the most shocking Holocaust film is Come and See, the 1986 film from the Soviet Union about the 1943 Belarusian genocide, where 1/4 of the population of Belarus were killed over the course of, I think, 2 months.
I know, absolutely. And people forget it. And this is
actually, in that film, it must be the only Holocaust film where there's only one Jewish person.
In Ukraine, there was 30,000 killed in 2 days, wasn't there? In the middle, by mainly Ukrainians.
Well, actually, it has to be
hyper obsessed with this one war. They're not talking about wars that have happened in other countries, Yemen, Syria, where millions of people were in total. We were talking about Dresden earlier, we killed about I think about 500,000 people, and yet here, where we're talking about 30 to 40,000 people dying, of course, every single life lost is horrendous. But they're like, oh my God, this is a genocide. This is the worst war to have ever happened.
The problem is with Gaza.
They're completely blind to every other war.
Gaza is a social media war, right? At the end of the day, Hamas are deliberately putting human shields in there so they can film the remnants of them and send it around the world. And also, I have to say, you've got people campaigning against Donald Trump saying this, that and the other. Then you've got President Xi of China, 1.5 to 2 million Muslims in concentration camps.
Yeah,
nobody cares.
And Chloe makes a brilliant point, as she often does, is that...
That's quite real.
It's true. But the reality is the media tend to shine a spotlight on one particular story, and we forget all the other tragedies. And the reality is there's horrendous stories all around the world at the moment. What I really hope in 2025 is that with Trump coming in on Monday, effectively, we should start to hopefully get a more peaceful place. And wouldn't it be great if we start to get an end to these wars, whatever side you've been on in the past? Let's sort of campaign.
Well, it's already happening, isn't it? With Trump coming in, even Starmer's now changing his mind. A lot of people are U-turning. Qatar kicked out Hamas.
Absolutely, and that's the interesting thing. that basis.
So when we come back, we're going to show you this unbelievable front page of The Sun, and I'll give you a little précis. A young man was knifed to death by a killer who now has a secret identity, and lo and behold, there's a rap star on the BBC singing about how marvellous this killing is and how marvellous knife crime is in general. Wonder if the two are connected. More next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, so here we go. I find this just absolutely extraordinary. A balaclava-clad rapper who boasts about killing and is promoted by the BBC can today be unmasked as the murderer of Schoolboy Jimmy Misran. A Sun probe discovered 10, which is the name of the act, is Jake Fahey, 35, recently released from a life sentence for the 2008 murder of a gentle giant called Jimmy, who was 16 from South London.
Not much of a life sentence, that, isn't it?
Absolutely scandalous.
And he's not been rehabilitated, has he?
It's absolutely
he's
disgusting.
Proud of it.
No, and I think actually when you look at rappers' lyrics, and there's a number of rappers who have been in jail. I was looking at the list from 2 Chainz to.
Don't give us the list. It doesn't matter.
Oh no,
Nobody knows.
R. Kelly. No, but the principle is exactly that. Rap music is a lot about. Those are the sort of lyrics.
It's the drill music specifically.
Exactly.
Andrew, I want to ask you this. So obviously, first of all, I appreciate you can't give legal advice, but you are a barrister, right? One would assume. So let me ask you about the law and the politics.
Yeah.
One would assume the politics is the Home Secretary is saying, I want this thing back in prison. Presumably being out on licence. So if you get a life sentence for murder, even if you're released, you're still on a licence for life. Can you explain that all to us?
So
hasn't he breached that with this?
So with sentencing, this is what it works. And they've tried to explain it more. They started televising the sentencing remarks from the judges. And the reason for that is to shine a spotlight. And they always say that sunlight is the best disinfectant. A lot of people have lost trust. A lot of people have lost trust in the judicial system, and I always say that trust comes in on foot and leads on horseback. So what
You've
happened?
Never said that before.
I have
bingo
T-shirts in there. The reality is this, however, they started to explain how sentences work, and it's supposed to be a science. And what they have a sentencing council who say for this particular crime, this is the tariff, and you turn around and you say, look, and you then listen to counsel. There'll be aggravating factors, which means you get a higher sentence, and mitigating factors, which bring it down.
Yes,
that's what happens.
But how long is it? He's had about 14 years.
Murder is compulsory. It's a life sentence. That's what they have to do. But they normally say they recommend a minimum sentence, and then that's how it comes into play.
So I'm going to ask a series of very easy, obvious questions because you're the expert. So what happens is I've got a life sentence. That means that my life will have certain restrictions forever, which you can explain. And then what will happen is I will spend a portion of that life sentence in prison. So I think we all understand the prison bit and the minimum sentence. What happens when I'm released?
So you're on something called licence, which basically means if you commit something else again, you're hauled back in. So you still get your life sentence, which means that you have restrictions. You might have reporting restrictions, curfews, and so on and so forth, which apply for the rest of your life. If you're released on licence, if you commit another crime, you'll be brought back into court, and you can work on that sort of basis. So looking, and each particular one, is generalities.
But clearly, it is. Oh God, this is an awful thing to say.
Awful.
But it is legal. It is legal to talk about knife crime in a positive way, right? It is legal as long as you're not goading anyone to do it. You're not inciting. It's also presumably legal to taunt the relatives of a dead murder victim.
Yeah, it is.
Will he go back to prison?
Well, you know my views. I think absolutely. It's
but will he? Not should he?
Is it illegal? Is he breaching his terms by, celebrating what he's done?
I would argue, and very strongly, that absolutely it's very clear in the public outcry about this, and we had brilliant Julia's show earlier, and you heard the public reaction, the disgust, the absolute disgust at the way this has happened. We need to do something.
But is he breaching his probation?
Will he go to prison?
Is he breaching it?
He's clearly shown that he's not rehabilitated.
Yeah.
If he's not actually committed a crime, but they can see that he's not rehabilitated.
And we don't want to prejudice what's going to happen in the judicial system. But the general principle they should look at that behaviour, and I would absolutely say.
I mean, you're right. We shouldn't prejudice.
But there wouldn't be a jury in that, would there?
Couldn't I turn round and say, look, what we have here is a convicted murderer who has knifed somebody to death, a 16-year-old, particularly awful situation, and what his behaviour now suggests he's likely to reoffend.
Yes.
And probably is reoffending.
I think the case is so clear
okay.
that you've got to do that. But what I don't like is being judge and jury in the media. So you're right, everybody's entitled to the fair representation. But for me, and for actually anybody listening to the facts that we have been given, it's very clear.
And my final question to you, and thank you so much for answering all these. When I was a kid, they had something called Her Majesty's Pleasure.
Yes.
That doesn't exist anymore, does it? Because my understanding is, in the old days, effectively the Home Secretary could keep you in or let you out, and it didn't really. There was no recourse to anything. Am I right or wrong?
Well, it depends on the sentence. Is the reality, and that's why they say when they're doing the sentencing, those are the factors. Look at mitigating, aggravating, so on and so forth. The circumstances of the murder, and we've seen a number of cases now, and they say that they always wonder why somebody got this sentence for murder and somebody else has got a much more lenient one, and it depends on the circumstances of the case. And the trouble with the media is that we only get a few sound bites. Cases sometimes go on for weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years, and what happens is you're distilling that into little sound bites. The one thing I would say about the story, and I'm sure probably the only one in the studio who's going to stick up for this, I think it's wrong to bring the BBC on this, and I'll tell you why. Is that all they're doing, they are playing the rap music, which has got terrible lyrics anyway. They promoted it on BBC One Extra. They're not promoting him as a murderer, and some of the headlines have suggested it's the BBC promoting this sort of stuff. But they're doing, they're playing rap music.
I know that rap music often has, bad lyrics. That's, maybe doesn't, about sort of treatment of women, for example, can be a bit dodgy. It can be a bit explicit. But the lyrics on his songs spoke about him sharpening his blades. Spoke about pools of blood, for example. It was pretty dodgy stuff.
Drill music is insightful, isn't it?
You questioned whether they should be playing it on the radio.
Do you want me to have a read of an extract?
Have a look.
Of the Sun. So here we go. So this is just to be clear to absolutely everybody watching and listening to this. This is the rapper 10, who is in fact the murderer of Jimmy Mizran, who was murdered aged 16. He's faced a life sentence. His name is Jake Fari. And let's see whether you think that the lyrics that he has written and performed demonstrate somebody who has been rehabilitated and safe to walk the streets. Sharpen up my blade, I've got to keep those necessary. Stay alert and kept it ready. Any corner could be deadly. Judge took a look at me before the trial even started. He already knows he's going to throw the book at me. I mean, that's not great.
He didn't. He was out in about 14. You should never get 14 years.
Oh no, sorry.
There's far worse language and lyrics than that. Yes.
Sorry. Let me go to another bit. See a man's soul fly from his eyes and his breath's gone. Seeing blood spilt, same floor he was left on.
And also watched him melt like Ben and Jerry's. I mean, the lyrics are disgusting. But what we need to do is then look at the whole genre, because what people will say is actually listen to this sort of stuff. Rap music is not pretty.
Well, drill music,
it's
sort of incitement.
Been listening to
exactly.
This.
It's sort of like an incitement, isn't it? Because gangs actually brag about what they did to the other gang.
And I was looking at the number of rappers who are in prison, who've been sentenced, whatever, and there's a long list, very easy to see, and some names we will know, we won't know all of them, but you look at the crimes they committed. It's that sort of culture.
Either way, I would suggest to you, before we go to a break, and I don't know if you can see it, and obviously those listening can't see it at all, but I'll describe what we're looking at. We're looking at a guy in a modified balaclava. He's sitting on a yellow Lamborghini. Obviously he works out, he's got all sort of quite cool tattoos. I think that is quite an appealing image to a teenager, and I think the fact that is being put out on our media is something to be extremely concerned
And can I just say before we leave the story, my thoughts go to the family and friends who are directly affected by this horrendous murder. We always forget in this, it's all about a little focus on the criminal. The fact is, a family has been destroyed and torn apart as a result of this.
One final question. By the way, the gallery have just made a good point. They've played this, but they wouldn't play Freezing this Christmas. No. But let me just ask this question. And once again, I appreciate, Andrew, that I've drilled you for a lot of information. To what extent is this a proceed of crime? right? Because this man's lyrics are based on the murder of a 16-year-old that he participates in, that he has been convicted of. Is it not possible for the family of this young man to say that we want the proceeds of this to be taken off him?
Well, I think there's a wider picture, as I say. If you look at all of this genre of music, this is what it's about. And I think what we need to do is look at that as a society, with a clamp down on social media platforms now about what their responsibility, and they have to pay a percentage of their gross turnover if they don't deal with it. This is incitement. If you listen to the lyrics of this sort of stuff,
because each gang does it about
attack.
I mean, the Cray Twins film, that's when they changed the law from the Proceeds of Crime Act.
I was going to try and give an example of incitement, but in doing so, I might break the law myself. But effectively, you're saying to me, it sounds like, look, the Home Secretary is going to be very keen to take action on this, but what the court's going to be interested in is that this person is clearly not rehabilitated and is clearly inciting, which in of itself is a criminal offence.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at those sort of things, but I think there's a more general thing. So it's not just this.
No,
you need to look at the whole music genre and to what extent we say there's freedom of speech as opposed to
I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's go to a break, because I think Andrew's right. I think we should have a discussion about whether this type of music should be
Biggie
allowed.
and Tupac both murdered, and they were the head of
I was looking, there's a long list of rappers.
So coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about whether our society is giving the wrong message to young people by venerating this absolute rat bag. More next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, right, so we are going to talk about the way that the media is promoting violence, but during the break we were talking about various pop bands, and somebody talked about East 17, and I happen to know this is crazy. So Stay Another Day is a moving song about the death of Tony Mortimer's brother from cancer, and about being in the ward with him as he died. Right, but when he died, apparently what East 17 were told was, look, you can't have two blokes as a duo, it's just a bit strange, right? So we've only got Brian Harvey and Tony Mortimer. So Brian Harvey, who was working on a building site in Walthamstow, said, I know a couple of lads from the building site who wouldn't mind being in a boy band with us. So the other two, all they did was just stood there doing all the poses.
Yes.
They couldn't sing, they couldn't dance, they couldn't do...
Like Andrew Ridgeley.
Milli Vanilli.
They were just
neither of them did anything.
Exactly.
They were just a couple of plumbers who had been, do you fancy doing this? And that was it.
Yeah, but they were bloody good plumbers.
And it's great.
What's that?
And they got famous from that.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So of East 17, there was 4 of them, of which 2 of them were just blokes off the building site.
And nobody ever asked, why aren't those guys singing?
I think people did ask him.
Okay.
But no, any band is a fascinating story as to how they get together, and it's being the right place at the right time for so many of them. But Milli Vanilli, which I just mentioned, obviously they couldn't sing at all. You might remember.
No, they could, but they didn't.
But, well, it depends.
Andrew, I've asked you loads of stuff now. I want to talk a little bit to Chloe. I know this sounds pathetic, but you are the younger element of the room.
We're the same age. I just said
we're all the same age.
But how worried? Look, every generation is going to rebel against the older generation, but there are people getting in touch who say that, oh my goodness me, that there's a kind of alienated, second generation immigrant culture in the UK that has a propensity towards knife crime. That might be an unfair comment, but has a propensity towards this anti-establishment type thing. And bluntly, it is a terror of our inner cities that people are getting together into effectively ethnic gangs and going to war with each other, listening to this music.
Yeah, I mean, young people
I appreciate that doesn't happen in Oxford.
No, luckily not. Well, I'm sure that
there are gangs in Oxford. I think there are
it's a fairly relaxed place. Look, young people are really, really impressionable, and you make the very good point, Andre, that this guy on the front of the paper...
Yeah, looks cool.
He looks pretty cool, actually, with his cool tattoos and his Lamborghini. We know young boys, they love the look of fancy cars and whatnot. And you might say, oh, young people, don't be silly, they're not going to be sympathetic to a murderer. But we've currently got, if you go on Instagram or TikTok, you've got all of these fan pages for the Luigi guy that murdered the healthcare CEO in America. They absolutely love the guy because he's hot and he looks cool. You've got, you had a TikTok trend of people talking about how amazing Osama bin Laden's letter to America is. You've got people praising terrorists on there, saying 9/11 was a great thing. They're so impressionable, these young kids, so we do have to be careful about what they're listening to.
When I watch BBC London, and I genuinely think it is worth watching just to understand how bad it is, but every now and again, and Ash has said this loads of times, they have an inspirational youth leader in South London. You know, basically, you don't want to be in the gangs like I was and all this sort of thing. You know, these schools in inner city London, they're not saying, oh, here's a former pupil, Andrew Eborn, who's a barrister. They're saying, oh, you know, here's Keith, who stabbed 4 people when he was in a cocaine dealing gang. And I look, and I see these pictures of principally black and Asian young people in these classrooms, and you think, well, that's not happening in Tunbridge Wells. They don't go to, you know, they don't go to my old private school and go, oh, Derek was an armed robber after he left the school, but he's now going to talk about how you shouldn't.
But they're not going to listen to Andrew because he didn't come, you know, from where they came from.
I'll tell you.
Hang on a second, Andrew. But you take my point, Chloe, don't you? Which is that these inspirational youth leaders are all bloody washed up criminals themselves, and we're force feeding this to inner city kids when we should be saying, do you know something about 10? What we're going to do is we're going to drag him back to prison. We're going to boot his backside into solitary confinement in Belmarsh, and we're going to do to him what we successfully did to Tommy Robinson.
Well, I think he does need to be made an example of, so that he
Send
knows.
him to see Shamima.
So that he.
Drop her up, parachute him in.
I actually spoke to her first husband.
Oh, really?
Yes, he's actually.
Did he regret it?
He's actually quite good.
Has she had more than one husband?
Yeah, she's had many. But look, we cannot be glorifying knife crime, and people need to be made an example of. The reason why you've got so many little kids running around London with machetes having duels in broad daylight is because they don't see their peers made an example of for misbehaving. You've got people who have been found with machetes and knives by the police, and they say, oh, it's all right, just give them another chance. Next thing you know, they've murdered someone.
And you also need, as you say, proper role models. At the moment, it's very negative role models, people like Andrew Tate and so on and so forth, who degrade women and make those sort of things. And people look up to them because they think, oh, they're rich and famous and it's outrageous. We need some good role models. You need some good people who live wholesome without being boring lives, and to show that good is okay.
You need both good role models and proper policing. It's got to be a
But they're not cool, are they?
If it's the case that if you're found with a knife, that's it, straight to prison.
I don't know. Beckham happily married. I mean, there were allegations, but I don't think they were true. Beckham happily married, phenomenally rich, phenomenally successful.
And he should be. And I think what the trouble is now, what people want to do, if you ask a lot of the younger generation now, all they want to do is be famous. Yes. They suddenly turn around, there's a TikToker, and you do the other bits and pieces, and here's somebody on Instagram, and I can do this on OnlyFans or whatever.
Since X Factor, really.
And that's what they do. And what's happening now, that whole thing of Andy Warhol, your 15 minutes of fame, that becomes their inspiration.
Yes.
What we need to turn around is some people in the public eye to be good role models. Say, actually, it's okay to do good in this world.
But the actual...
Treat people with respect, and that should happen.
But the actual authorities, everyone can see through, they're actually bad people, aren't they, overall? You can see
everybody
the establishment...
There's good and bad in everybody. If you prick me, do I not believe?
But not really with the council,
laugh,
not really with governments and institutions. We can see they've all been captured and they're all feathering, they're all bent. And so if you're one of these, you go, why am I going to look up to them? They're
not all bent, but some of them, as soon as we shine a spotlight on it, more and more revelations are coming forward. And what happens is the reason people are not calling it out is because it's the sign of hypocrisy. And they've got their own things in their closets, a lot of them, to turn around and say, we're not going to do it. So what we need to do, let's work on the basis that we should be looking for good in 2025, find those good role models, because society will be better as a result.
All right, I'm going to be crass for a minute. Right, you are pretty rich and pretty successful. Fact.
Phenomenally.
Right, okay. So what you did was worked hard at school, went to a decent university, became a barrister, moved to London to live in digs in the Inns of Course and all that sort of thing. You know, the reason I'm doing the job that I'm doing now is because I like debating at university, at school and university, and became quite good at it. Right. Nowadays, everyone's like, oh, let's get a photo of my dinner on TikTok. And you think, now, I would never compare us to this guy, but, Elton John always made the point that fame was the price he paid for having to be an international rock star.
Absolutely.
He loves music. He's brilliant at it. He wanted to do rock music his entire life. And so the fame element was what he had to do in order to build that business.
Absolutely. And this is the problem, is people in social media are living a lie. People only post their best thing. Everybody assumes...
Sun always shines on TV.
Of course they do. And there's a great song there somewhere. Very good. Everybody assumes that somebody else is having a better life.
Yes.
And as a result, it causes things like mental illness and depression and so on and so forth. The reality is, life is not great for everybody. Everybody has issues. The more we can talk about it in the public eye, the better. And also talk about how you can cope with it.
And I've heard this saying the other day, and it's true. Instagram eats first. Right, you save up the whole month or whatever to go to a lovely expensive restaurant. Then you meticulously photograph the photo. It's like, here's my dinner. Oh, just eat the bloody thing.
Yes.
I know. I mean, I hate people having their phones out at the dinner table constantly. I know if you're having a conversation and you reference some really funny video and then you're like, oh, let me show it to you quickly, then fine. But I think if you have your phone out at the table, as all these young people do, if I'm talking to you, Andre, and then I'm just texting at the same time, it's like you're talking to me and I just turn and start talking to Andrew and completely ignoring you.
Well, you do
so
that,
rude. But I mean, just speaking of, we've been talking about...
absolutely right.
I like taking pictures of my dinner.
We've been talking about male role models, but also there's a huge crisis for female role models as well. We've just had Bonnie Blue. Bonnie Blue is everyone's role model now. And,
who is Bonnie Blue?
She's
the girl who's just slept with over 1,000 people in 12 hours.
Awful.
But girls are seeing, I can get really rich and famous if I do this stuff online.
600 grand a month.
I get these Instagram pages come up on my feed saying, oh, follow my account because I'll show you how to make 100k a month selling foot photos and doing OnlyFans. It's appealing
I've got to say,
it does sound appealing.
Bonnie Blue slept with 1,000 men. I've got to be honest with you, I've been to Salford as well. Okay, we'll be back with the paper review straight after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome. This is the press preview with Andre Walker and Asher Gould and our guest co-host this morning. Good
morning, everyone.
Andrew, Eborn and Chloe Dobbs. So straight over to you, Asher.
Morning.
Right, let's start with the Daily Express. Win your food shop for a year, but that's not the main story. The main story is a very serious story. Why aren't you wanting to find out the real truth? And this is about the grooming gangs. A woman repeatedly raped as a child by an Asian grooming gang has demanded that Keir Starmer holds a full national inquiry as past reviews have not even touched the surface. Anyway, they've basically announced today they're not really going to do a full one.
Well, this is what, so Fiona Goddard, and good for her for coming out. She said...
and we need more of this.
We need more of this. She was saying that they were silent until Elon Musk basically shone a spotlight on this. It is scandalous. I also hate it's scandalous about the euphemism of calling it grooming gangs. They are child rape gangs.
And torture, rape and torture gangs. I mean, what they did there, I would say, is up there with the Nazis. I mean, they're torturing girls and raping them. I mean, this is...
However, can I just be clear? Because the press preview goes out on the early breakfast, let's stick with grooming gangs, even though it's an irritating euphemism.
Yes, OK. We're calling it an irritating euphemism.
I appreciate it, and I know why you're saying what you're saying.
And all credit to this lady who's speaking out. It is horrendous. I always talk about grief. As soon as you personify it, and then people understand what's happening, because otherwise it's just a numbers game. It has been appalling. All credit to Elon Musk for shining a spotlight on
Exactly, and they're shooting the messenger like they do with, Tommy Robinson. Well, no matter what they did, it's what they're highlighting. If someone called 999 and go, there's a girl being raped, there's a murder gun, and they go, well, have you got a criminal record? Oh, we're not coming around then. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous.
It's nice to see that the pressure has got to the government a little bit in that they've made a bit of a U-turn and come out and said, oh, we're going to support 5 local inquiries. But it really is just too little too late. And the big big problem is that although inquiries in the past have revealed a heck of a lot of victims, the thing people are really crying out for is for officials to be held to account, people in councils, people in the police, etc. When you haven't got the statutory power to force people to turn up to inquiries, it's very difficult to hold those people to account. These government-backed local inquiries that are going to happen, they will not have this statutory power, which means I'm sure once again you'll see no one held to account for turning a blind eye to little girls being abused in such horrendous ways.
I think that's right, and I think there's a really critical point here for me. So I thought that Keir Starmer made a reasonable point at PMQs when he said, look, I'm a former professional prosecutor. You know, these sorts of crimes lead to significant mental health problems. It is hard to get all of the victims together, and it's hard to ensure that they're lucid. Some are very lucid, others have been so harmed that it's quite difficult to do. And I think that's a reasonable point. But I thought Kemi's point was better, which is this. Actually, this isn't really as much to do with the victims and the perpetrators as is to do with the wider context about how was this allowed to happen. Because look, we cover up, isn't it? Really? We can throw local officials to the wolves, and by goodness me, that would be better than what we've done already. And the whole however, the question is, why was this systemic failure something that took place?
Exactly, and this is why nobody should be resisting a public inquiry into this. Yes, I agree. What we need
Especially
to look at,
Jess Phillips, the woman.
Exactly, no, and I know Elon's language was a bit colourful and so on and so forth. But the reality is this: all we want to try and do is shine a spotlight on this to make sure it doesn't happen again. But also, there are two interesting things. There's the difference between criminal liability and civil liability. Yes. And if people have been in breach of their statutory obligation about the duty of care, then we need to look at that, because there could be actions on that sort of basis.
Once again, and you know, whenever I have a lawyer in the studio, I always try to exploit them as best I can, simply because it's an exploitative business. But what I was going to say, Andrew, is this. Presumably, you would say as a lawyer that the reason why you have a public inquiry is because this is neither strictly or entirely a civil or a criminal case. What it actually is there is a criminal case element, there is a civil case element, there's also a professional misconduct element, but what there actually is a governance issue. And the only way that you're going to look at the governance issue is if you have a public inquiry.
And two issues, and the reason they always put up two arguments they put forward. One, they say there's already been a report, we don't do it again, and the other is it takes so long, we won't get it forever. Both of those are false premises. The first thing is there's no harm in shining a spotlight. Trust, they always say, comes in on foot and leaves on horseback. The reality is exactly that. There's an all-time low in terms of the authorities. If they've got nothing to hide, a full investigation should help. The other bit about taking a long time, it shouldn't take a long time.
No.
And there's no reason it shouldn't delay the other matters. You can get some people will turn around, and we could get it privately funded. There's a suggestion that people might turn around and get that.
I always hate, and we'll move on to the next paper, but I always hate these people who go, I don't feel it'd be appropriate to comment until the report's done. Oh, for God's sake, what a load of garbage. You can comment quite openly. If you need to apologise, you apologise.
Exactly. And the whole point is we'll get to the truth of the matter.
But they won't know. They'll fudge it like the last one. And the news inquiry say we can't talk about it now because there's an inquiry going on. I mean, really, we know what's going on. There needs to be, you know, police actions all over the place, mass arrests, and then have the inquiry.
The general public won't let that happen now. And thank goodness, I say again, for Elon Musk and others, Maggie Oliver, who's shining a spotlight on these matters to make sure it doesn't come out of public discussion.
I'll tell you what I would do if it was me. If I was the British Home Secretary or Prime Minister, I would get onto Zoom, right, with all the chief constables in the country, and I would say, get your uniform and a patrol car, right, because I want you to free victims who are chained to radiators tonight. I don't want you to report back to me. I don't want you to do, a strategic review or any of that. I want you to get your backside out of this building and start freeing this and deal with this problem right now. And you do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And more people will come forward when they know something's going to be done.
Correct.
So all praise to that lady who's come forward on the front page of the Daily Express. Well done to her for doing that, because other people will hopefully talk about their experiences so we can actually get some action this time.
OK, the next one's the Times, isn't it?
The Times, yeah. Attorney General was paid 30 grand for representing Jerry Adams. The Attorney General has been paid £30,000 to represent Jerry Adams against IRA bomb victims in a High Court case that is due to go to trial next year, the Times understand. Lord Hermer case.
OK, so Rich, so you and I are going to come to blows over this slightly, aren't we? But first let's go to Chloe. Right, here's my view on this. Lawyers will say, well, I've got to take whoever walks through the door. Everybody knows that Matrix Chambers, where Richard Hermer is from, where Keir Starmer is from, specialise in bluntly working for the absolute worst wrong-uns in the country, getting compensation for Levi Belfield, for, you know, representing, they're currently attempting to get Anjam Chowdhury's sentence reduced. You know, all the IRA guys, all the terrorist guys, all of these people.
Didn't he represent the parents of the alleged Southport attacker?
Yeah, but let's not do that because it's going to court next week. Yeah. But they're all with Matrix Chambers. I mean, I've said this jokingly, but, you know, to what extent is this not part of the problem? You know, but to get Richard Hermer and others sitting there going, we're just lawyers, we take any cases. Yeah, well, why is it that they're always terrorists?
Look, I don't know much about Matrix Chambers, but
it's the Matrix.
I keep hearing case after case after case of people like Keir Starmer representing people who conveniently are bad guys. I don't think any of the public are convinced that lawyers are completely neutral.
I make the joke that Matrix should be a prescribed terrorist group. I'm not serious about that, but I have to say to you, they have found brilliant ways of getting £1 million settlements for murderers.
You know, I'm going to put this in.
Go on, Andrew. Okay,
go on, Andrew.
So lawyers are servants of the court. That's what they are. They're not judge and jury. They're there to represent whatever client it is and to put their case. They cannot lie to the court.
No,
so that you've got to work in terms of those sort of regulations. Look at it the other way. If they turn around and say, we're not going to take your case because we think you're guilty, that would be far worse than actually giving somebody a case and representing them, make sure they have an appropriate mouthpiece. And I think that's what we have to do.
But that's not the allegation that's being made. And the allegation, by the way, might be wrong, and so I'll let you respond, Andrew.
Yes.
But the allegation is that specialist solicitors firms trawl the worst rotters in the country in order to come up with cases that are effectively vexatious, to just sue over and over and over again. You know, Anjam Chowdhury has been convicted and sentenced for being involved in 90% of the terror plots in Britain, and this Gareth Pearce and her outfit go, I know what we need to do, get £1 million in legal aid to try and say he's been hard done by. You know, why can't we just leave him?
Well, but the reality, as I say, is that lawyers are not supposed to be judge and jury. They had to be reliant on the justice system. So if somebody are doing things in an inappropriate way in that justice system, then absolutely we should call it out. But lawyers are there as a mouthpiece.
But why is it always the same firms over and over again? The reality is, look, Gareth Pearce and her chums are the ambulance chasers of the terrorist world, aren't they? Right? They're going out, they're actively soliciting for work. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, they're called solicitors, right? But they're actively seeking work from people who are who they encourage to file human rights cases, you know, that really just demean the country, cost a fortune. I mean, you know, if I said I wanted to marry my partner and spend £1 million on it, I don't get anything like that. But Levi Belfield gets to sue the prison service.
So what we need to do is to make sure that the justice system itself is right. If people are abusing that system, then we need to call it out. But basically, as I go back to the central point, is that lawyers are not judge and jury. They're there to be a mouthpiece to present the best possible case.
How many Al Qaeda terrorists have you represented?
I'm an intellectual property lawyer.
All right.
So the answer is, of course, no. But I have represented people. That's what
we'll
you do. As a younger lawyer, you do criminal cases and various other cases and so on and so forth. But all we are, and this is why people
say... But if the Islamic State wanted you to trademark their brand...
If they invented a new type of, you know, IED, you'd have to... The technology...
And there's a difference from a commercial side to a criminal side. Everybody's entitled to a fair trial.
Here we go.
No, but they are. Everybody's entitled to a fair trial.
OK, I'll tell you where we'll leave it before we go on to more stories. We will say that whilst you insist that lawyers are neutral, you wouldn't represent the Islamic State yourself?
I will reserve judgment, my lord. No. The reality is this, is that you mustn't be, and part of the thing about being a lawyer is you're a servant to the court. And as a servant to the court, all you're doing is presenting the best possible case.
So you've got to be impartial in some way.
Well, not only impartial, but you can't lie to them. All you can do is say, and we have to remember the justice system, and it's right, it's this way, everybody's innocent until proven guilty.
Right, Asher, you've got to talk about Donald Trump, please.
I love the photo of Donald Trump.
So can we just explain what he's done? Donald Trump has released his official portrait for his presidential inauguration, and he's pulling the same face as the mugshot in Georgia,
which made him millions because he put that on mugs and T-shirts and everything else.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was great press for him. That is comeback of the year award.
Brilliant.
Mugshot to photo of you being inaugurated as president. That's quite a comeback.
Next story in the Times, looser loan rules could get economy on the move, so they're going to make it easy to get mortgages. I mean, what can go wrong? We've never seen
as long as people can afford to pay it back, otherwise you're going to have a big problem, aren't you? And that's the problem.
Yeah, that sounds smart, doesn't it?
An overworked young staff signed off with stress. Almost a third of young workers were signed off work with stress last year, researchers found. What do you think, Chloe? This is your generation. Lazy young people.
I've just been watching earlier today, I don't know if you saw, Fraser Nelson did that documentary for Channel 4 on the benefits crisis, and it is just absolutely shocking the number of people signed up.
I think over half of households are on benefits now.
Well, what they do in the NHS is it's just an easy way out for them to give them a GP sick note to say, right now you're on benefits, because then they don't have to treat them anymore. They get put on benefits. They're not given any treatment for their mental health problems whatsoever. They're just left to wither away. Often their mental health getting worse, being sat at home.
If they had it in the first place, a lot of them swing the lead, don't they?
Well, it's extraordinary.
Well, the thing is, I think that there are definitely issues with mental health getting worse.
Yeah.
I think especially with COVID and everything, there definitely also is an issue with far more people being diagnosed than actually having.
But they know
problems.
what to say. Go, oh, I'm depressed. I can't go.
Well, that's the thing.
Can I just
If you say I'm suicidal, straight away full max benefits. That's it. They won't question it.
But hang on a second. I've said this about mental health problems. I mean, I think nowadays people go too far. For me, a mental health problem is where you are medically unwell. You have an imbalance in your brain that causes, say, depression or whatever for no good reason. There are other people who are depressed for good reason. Right. I was fairly depressed during lockdown because A, I was under house arrest living on my own, and B, my mother was dying in hospital and I wasn't able to see her because of the lockdown. Now, look, I genuinely think there is an element where we're being unfair to young people.
Yes.
I think we are battering them. I mean, I've never seen Julia Hartley-Brewer virtually cry, but I'll tell you what, when she was talking about the fact her daughter's first summer as a teenager was going to be her locked up at home, you know, she was really genuinely upset about it. I mean, I think what with the pressure of impossibility to buy a house, with the fact that inflation's out of control, so everyone's in poverty, with the fact that you can't blooming heat your house because of the cost of it, with the fact that social media is making you feel like a failure, with the fact that Photoshop makes you feel ugly, the streets aren't safe. All of these things are contributing.
There's just not much hope for the future.
To a low level mental health problem that everyone's got.
Yes. And you're absolutely right. And there should be proper protection and support in place. And it's when people abuse that's when you need to shine a spotlight on it. But you're right. We don't want to devalue or take away from the proper care. The statistics, however, are alarming. Almost a third of young workers were signed off with stress last year, but those over 45, it goes to 1 in 10.
There's got to be something
wrong there somewhere, doesn't there?
They are just left to wither away. The NHS does not help them. If you're lucky enough to get an appointment, all they will do is prescribe you some drugs, and then off you pop, which is just a sticking plaster. They're not giving people proper therapy, and these people who are young now, they may stay in the benefit system for the rest of their lives.
It's easy to. I mean, this was the tragedy of the lockdown. It's easy to deal with 50 people who have a mental health problem. When you've got 4 million of them, because of the way they've placing somebody under house arrest. I mean, I was placed in solitary confinement. Let's be clear, because I'm living on my own during a lockdown. That is solitary confinement.
Awful.
Right. And so what are you expecting people to be like? And so why is the NHS deluged? The NHS is deluged for the very reason that we saw protect the NHS, stay at home, save lives. That's why the NHS is deluged with mental health problems.
And it's right. And let us be the generation that talk about mental health so the next generation don't suffer the stigma. And that's what I admire. People in the public eye who have genuine mental health issues. I mean, Tony Slattery, we lost him a few days ago.
But they don't get the help because there's not enough funding, because there's people swinging the lead.
Yeah,
but this disabled people aren't getting looked after properly.
And this is the point: is we make sure that people don't abuse. Make sure there's a proper system in place, and abusers of that system are called out. But those who need it, make sure they get proper care. Because you're right, people shouldn't be waiting forever.
But I've seen it up north. I've seen it up north where what happens is somebody gets made redundant. You know, they're fairly sprightly to start with. You know, after 2 years, they're drinking special brew and eating pizzas, and that is
having the time of their lives.
Well, no, but that will cause you medical problems. You will be depressed.
It's a
will be obese.
But also, we mustn't put people in cotton wool. Life is not good. And I think the more we should do is teach people that life is not good. It's how you cope with it. And talking about that, how people cope in different things. I often will talk to people in the public eye just about mental health issues, how they cope. And just walking out in fresh air in countryside is a great way of...
So we need to tell them life isn't good.
No, but life
That's
isn't
not
good.
very optimistic. Hey, kids, life isn't good.
Life is sometimes rubbish.
Yeah.
But also, sometimes it's great.
It helps you, actually. The hard times help you.
It's what we were talking about earlier on social media. It paints one picture to people's... You see everybody else's life is lovely, and therefore your life is rubbish. The reality is everybody suffers. If you prick me, do I not bleed? If you tickle me, do I not laugh?
I'm not trying that.
We'll find out in the break, won't we? Yeah, we'll try that.
This is not the BBC.
Talk about mental health. It's important, but make sure that people don't abuse the system.
Okay,
a lot of people.
Chloe, we're going to go to a break. Oh no, do finish the point. Actually,
we talk about people abusing the system, and some people genuinely are being bad apples. But you have got people who are genuinely terrified to come off of their benefits, because you could declare, go to the doctor, say I think I'm fit to work. Then you've no longer got your sick note to say you're on benefits now. You go get a job which pays you barely any more than what you were getting on benefits, and then let's say you get sacked from that job a week in. Then you've got no income. You might get a little bit of universal credit job seekers allowance, but it's going to be nowhere near what you were getting on mental health disability benefits. So it's very risky.
You go back to the doctors and say I'm depressed again from the
story I always tell.
You might end up with no income for a long time.
The story I always tell was that they redid all the terrace houses in Lee in Lancashire or Greater Manchester, depending on which way you look at it. The place looked absolutely brilliant, and every now and again there would be a house that wasn't refurbished, which had a terrible door and all the old cladding that was awful. It hadn't been sandblasted. And I met somebody and they went, oh, they've redone my streets. And I went, oh, who was that awful person who hasn't redone the house? And the bloke went, it's me. I went, well, why didn't you redo it? He said, because if you were unemployed non-benefits, then you got it done for free. If you had a job, you had to pay £4,000, and I didn't have the £4,000. He said, the problem with this country is, by working all your life, you're the one that's made to be the scumbag.
Yeah, and we've got to incentivise people to make sure they do it. And actually, they should do it. It's not just about the money, and don't worry about losing the benefits, because it's a real concern. You've got to make sure society looks after others in that society. We need to be a better place.
Great. Well, we're going to continue with the paper review straight after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is Talk. This is the paper review with Andre Walker and Asher Gould, and we're joined by our guest co-hosts, who are Chloe Dobbs and Andrew Eborn. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello. Nice to be back.
Great.
Right. Oh, look, there's Mike Graham. He's coming up in a bit. He's got an orange glow around him, so he's having ready brek this morning. Right. The Daily Mail. You won't remember that, Chloe, but that used to be the ready brek adverts.
They did. They were great, those.
They were great. Bring them back. Bring back the ready brek advert.
Absolutely.
Labour blasted. Daily Mail. Labour blasted over toothless grooming probes. Ministers finally announced local reviews into child abuse scandal, but critics insist full national inquiry is needed. Labour faced fury last night for launching toothless small-scale probes into the grooming gangs instead of a full national inquiry. Yvette Cooper announced 5 local reviews into badly hit towns. This is a fudge. Chloe, what do you think about this?
I think it absolutely is a fudge. Now, she's only offering 10 million quid for these investigations. And just for context, the Telford inquiry, which supposedly these ones are going to be modelled off, that one alone cost 8 million quid, and we've apparently got to investigate 5 towns with only 10 million quid.
And what was Grenfell? That was like 100 million, and the post office scandal.
So this is really, really limited. They clearly felt the pressure. They felt the need to do something after you then had Labour MPs. You had Sarah Champion, the MP for Rotherham, standing up and saying we need a national inquiry, and asking if this will have statutory powers, which it doesn't. But it just goes absolutely nowhere near enough. They're just ticking a box saying, look, we did something, we listened, but it's probably not going to have that much effect. It's better than nothing.
It's a moral stain.
Is it better than nothing? Because it's sort of brushing it under the carpet and getting away for a real investigation.
It's a moral stain on our society in the same way as we had the post office scandal, the blood scandal, and other bits and pieces, and it's taken the media to shine a spotlight on it.
But even then, the post office are not punishing anyone from it.
The reality is that if there is a full national inquiry, it is probably going to expose a heck of a lot of people in the Labour Party. Most of these places where they had grooming gang hotspots had Labour-run councils.
So just to be clear, just because we don't want to start a conspiracy theory, it will expose lots of people in the Labour Party for having been incompetent and complicit, rather than being the perpetrators.
Yes, for turning.
But if you're complicit, you're just as bad as the perpetrators, aren't you? I mean,
you could
what we need to do is go.
But that's why the Labour Party don't want to do a national inquiry. Keir Starmer keeps standing up saying, "Oh, we're not doing it because the ICSA inquiry is sufficient." We know that it did not cover the kind of grooming gangs that the whole nation is talking about. Everyone can read through it. This is a case of Keir Starmer not doing the right thing morally because it suits his party politically, and that, I think, is pretty immoral.
And the important point is that we go in with an open mind and say, look, what we're going to do, not working backwards from the story. We don't necessarily know all the information. Some of the information that we have seen raises all sorts of questions which need to be answered. So we suspect there will be other issues which have been buried, if you like, and it's only by looking at those issues that we can basically deal with this issue. And I think that's the important point. And so just putting tiny little bits, a plaster on a gashing wound, is not the way to approach it.
Absolutely. Although the other argument the other way was Simon Danchuk has said, he's a former MP for Rochdale, he said, I fear that if there was a full public inquiry, the Labour Party would ensure the terms of reference were so tight as to make the results meaningless.
And then the public are not stupid. They are brilliant. They've all got behind this now. Yes. And I would urge everybody, don't let it go until we have answers to all of those questions.
Could Nigel Farage, he's threatened it, have his own, pay for their own.
As I mentioned earlier, what they're looking at, they can turn around and say, well, how much does it cost? We'll raise the money for that. And
but the thing is that it wouldn't have the statutory powers to force people to turn up, which is very problematic.
No, but I'll tell you what you could do.
But it would stop Labour from meddling with the terms of reference.
I'll tell you what you could do, which would send them absolutely apoplectic. There is a thing called an all-party parliamentary group, which is called an APPG, which is a parliamentary committee. It's not one that has legislative power, but it's still an official body in Parliament. You can set up the APPG for the investigation of grooming gangs and run the committee from a committee room in Parliament and have all the hearings in there. That would go off.
And the reason Nigel has mentioned about possibly raising the funds is just to deal with one of the arguments as to why they wouldn't do it. So they turn around and say, well, it's funding, we've done it already, it would take too long. You can deal with all of those arguments. The whole point is the public demand answers and deserve answers.
Right, yeah. The Guardian, no Israel vote on deal until Hamas agrees to all terms. Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel's cabinet will not meet to vote on the ceasefire deal intended to pause the war in Gaza until Hamas accepts all elements of the agreement.
What a remarkably stupid story.
But one of them has actually been killed. The 34 is actually, Hamas said, they died yesterday from an Israeli shelling. I don't believe that at all, but what's your point then?
Well, this is a remarkably stupid thing. So let's get this straight. The Israeli government has put together a peace deal that's been agreed. The formal ratification of it then is not going to happen until the other side say, we intend to ratify it as well.
It's complete nonsense.
Stupid story.
So what's going to happen is going to delay this until Donald Trump comes in on Monday Monday and deals with it, and he will get the solution. Behind it is disgusting, all the delays and everything else, and there was so much hope put on that sort of thing, and it's changed by the hour, didn't it? It was that roller coaster of emotion. I suspect, however, it's not going to be until Trump's in, and Trump said he's going to end all these things in a very short space of time. I think that's what's going to happen.
Talking of Trump, what do you think about Keir Starmer not being invited to the inauguration, but Alex Phillips was?
It is extraordinary.
Fantastic.
Well, and it's very clear, you know, and I was discussing this on my show this morning with Errol Musk, I thank you, who's on my show virtually every day. And I tell you what, I didn't imagine, it's the one time it's going to be good.
Yeah,
but
bingo.
I'll tell you what,
You're obsessed with him.
It's bingo, it's going to be good. No, but the important thing is this, is that if you can get access to somebody who's talking about those direct stories, and the reason is this, Trump is not a forgiving person. The thing that Starmer said about him, the thing that various people, David Lammy said about him, he's looking at that and saying, why would I invite these people if I've got an opportunity
isn't it the case that leaders of other countries are not normally invited to?
Well,
he broke that this year. So they always invite the British Prime Minister. As somebody points out, they've invited Nigel Farage.
Yes.
They've invited Dan Dukes, who is Nigel Farage's social media officer.
It is without doubt a snub and a deliberate one. And when we're talking about the special relationship, we should be very, very mindful of this.
But I worry about this, Chloe, because here is what has happened with Donald Trump and successive British Prime Ministers. I love this country, but I'm willing to deal with this idiot because I love the country so much, is the Donald Trump view. I mean, Steve Bannon said, and nobody has publicly disagreed with this, Steve Bannon said that when Donald Trump got Theresa May on her own or with a small number of officials, he said, please let me give you a brilliant trade deal. I see it as in America's strategic interest to support you leaving the European Union. And she said, we can't do anything to upset the Europeans. And now he didn't say it quite like this, but he basically said, F the Europeans. What we need to do is get together as the Anglosphere. Yeah. She said no.
Yeah, it's not very good.
So the man stood up and said, I'm going to give you the best trade deal of any country on earth and legalise haggis to celebrate it.
Well, I think we all know clear as day at this point that Theresa May is not a very good negotiator. And we saw that during the Brexit process, so I'm not too surprised with that. But I mean, come on, making David Lammy your foreign secretary, knowing what he has said about Trump in the past. Obviously, when they chose David Lammy, they didn't know for certain whether Donald Trump was going to win or not. But
they sent 100 people to help him out.
And then what's the name of the guy they've appointed now to also have talks with the US, who has also said really horrendous things about Trump? It's like,
I love the way you're making me responsible for you not knowing the name.
Peter Mandelson, Peter Mandelson.
Yes.
Lord Peter Mandelson. And also what's interesting is Mark Burnett, who was the creator of The Apprentice, who basically modelled Donald Trump. If you watch that whole sort of series,
that's why Donald Trump got his...
He got his thing. He's so brilliant at basically scripting what Donald Trump's going to be on an international basis. We should never underestimate what's going to happen on that sort of premise. It's going to be very interesting what happens over the next few months. Starmer was talking this week about putting AI front and centre to make Britain great again.
We're already the third biggest. We're never going to beat America and China.
But what we need to do is make sure we get the proper investment, make sure we encourage people like Elon to come and invest over here.
I'll tell you something.
He told him to not come to the conference. Now he's changed his way against U-turn on everything.
I'll tell you something that the Americans did do. The Americans, presumably, the American embassy in the United Kingdom was behind the news story from a few days ago, which was Lammy plans to sign the Chagos deal 4 days before Trump comes into power. They knew Lammy was going to do it. They leaked it to the press.
Of course.
I'll tell you what. And you can go to my YouTube channel, which is the Andre Walker channel. I talk about how I believe that giving the Chagos Islands effectively giving it to China via Mauritius will cause World War III. It's an incredibly dangerous situation. And Lammy, and I'll tell you the thing that worries me about Lammy, you had Lammy at the UN talking about Ukraine and linking it to the transatlantic slave trade. Yeah. There are many things you can say about Vladimir Putin, but the transatlantic slave trade has nothing to do with it.
And it's so right.
Completely nuts. He is completely driven by ideology, and the
stupidity.
The Chagos deal has given us a taste of what we're in for with this man. He's saying, we're giving away the Chagos Islands so that we can decolonise. It's not like Mauritius are they're not the natives.
Lammy,
it's not decolonising. He just lives in this delusion.
I'll tell you what is a remarkable detail about the Chagos Islands deal. First of all, an independent Mauritius has never ruled it. It only became interested when it became a vassal state to China. But here's the remarkable bit. The Chagosians, or whatever they're called, are against the deal because they say, why are we being given to Mauritius? We have no connection with the place.
No, exactly, and we need to keep shining the spotlight on it. And going back to the language about David Lammy and the terrible things he said about Trump.
He's a fat moron.
Well, but you also work on the principle that sometimes Trump forgives. J.D. Vance in 2016 called Trump the American Hitler. He then became his running mate, so he does...
maybe he thought that was
there's hope for Lammy yet, then?
Well, there may be, but actually... the feeling on the road is that it's not going to happen on that sort of basis. We need to get the special relationship. We need somebody to bridge that gap. Nigel has upset Elon because of Tommy Robinson, effectively, and say, look, he's not going to say he's a political prisoner and not going to have him in reform and so on and so forth.
Part of the problem you've got, and funnily enough, I've been talking to a lot of people in reform. I think one of the big problems you've got is a lot of people in America don't understand the sensitivity of having someone who has serious criminal convictions involved in your political party. The reality is, the fact that Tommy Robinson is in prison is not Farage's objection to him.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
Wasn't Mandelson had a dodgy mortgage application, didn't he?
There's all sorts of people. But actually, and we've both been posting about this on the Andrew Eborn show on YouTube as well.
Go for it.
But the reality is that Tommy Robinson's supporters will come out and say, he's never asked to join Reform.
Yeah, that's a reasonable point.
Come on. So you turn around. He doesn't want to join Reform, so leave him alone.
That reminds me, do you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of when the House of Commons authorities were so angry with John Bercow for refusing to go to the investigation or the hearing on his bullying allegations that they publicly announced he was banned from having a parliamentary pass. And he, the usual Bercow thing. I neither requested. What do you know? He always said. What did he say? I neither requested nor required it.
Exactly, and that's the principle. So we need to look at that sort of stuff. They fell out over that, and the reports of 100 million donation, that was never confirmed. But the whole report of that, all of a sudden they're saying he's not fit to be the leader. It was as a result of people saying basically Tommy Robinson, political prisoners.
Look at the spin of the Guardian, though. Urgent review to be held into grooming gangs. I mean, what on earth are they saying? Their spin is that Keir Starmer has acquiesced to a review.
Well, they would do, wouldn't they? And also, this is talking about Parliament. Russian diplomats in Lord security breach. Russian diplomats accessed a private area of Parliament in a major security breach just before Christmas that has alarmed security officials. The small group of diplomats joined a public tour of the Houses of Parliament and then broke off to enter a part of the House of Lords that was out of bounds before they were found out by security.
But you do wonder when you're talking about security, how this gets on the front page of the Guardian. So that must have been leaked by somebody in security who said this is what happened.
Do you know something? I remember when I worked in Parliament, there's a brilliant tour of Big Ben. And you can go on it for free if you speak to your member of Parliament. I'm not joking.
Has to be a fit member.
But yeah, that's right. You have to run up the stairs. But there was a chap who got in touch with me when I worked for the MP for Morecambe, who said I'd like to come on the Big Ben tour, but he also had an address in Tehran, right? So, his letter had his two addresses, one in Morecambe and one in Tehran. And I phoned up security and I said to them, and maybe this story's been proved wrong. I said, well. What should we do about this? Because we'd approve it. I mean, it's not for us to say no. They said, don't you worry. We've got security all over the place. Anyone on the tour is being monitored. Well, it turns out that's not true, isn't it?
Once you're in Parliament, you can go. I once went on a tour and they took me down and all the other people down the back bench of the House of Commons. I was a bit tired, so I sat down on the back bench and someone went, Sir, you can't sit on that. And I'll tell you what, the seats in the House of Commons are like a 1950s car. They've got the big springs.
They're very good.
No, they're horrific. They're really uncomfortable.
So I had in my office, I had one of the nice green House of Commons chairs with the logo on, and clearly their security.
You've stolen that. Yeah.
No, I didn't. No, my friend stole it,
oh, really?
And clearly their security. No, clearly their security is not very good because he just picked it up and walked out with confidence, and they didn't stop him.
That always does it.
I'll tell you what I saw once. Do you know how Norman Shaw North in the House of Commons is incredibly hot in the summer? Right, so anyway, a load of MPs got air conditioning units, but they thought they only had to rent them for 1 month. They had them on 5-year deals. I'll tell you what I saw. I saw the bailiffs turn up at Derby Gate, and can I tell you, the bailiffs, they were cocky, and obviously they'd gone, don't you worry, we'll get in here with the warrant. I'll tell you what, the police drew the guns and had them on the floor within seconds.
Good heavens.
That's how to deal with bailiffs.
Yes.
or get them to lift your mate's car.
Anyway, 03444499. Well, look, there's Mike Graham. He's still having his bran flakes. But we'll be back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is Talk. This is the paper review with Andre Walker and Asher Gould, and our guest co-hosts, who are Andrew Eborn and Chloe Dobbs. Welcome.
Right.
Okay.
The Daily Star, who are Daily Star, and Keno goes in studs up on Rod Stewart. I think that's probably a football thing, nothing else to worry about. And YMCA will save the world.
It's true.
Apparently the Village People are going to perform at the Donald Trump's inauguration, although they're all dead, the originals. Or very old, so it won't be any of the originals. But apparently that's going to heal the world. Of course.
Well, so what happens? The song it used to be played out, and you get Donald doing his wonderful dance. And
YMCA.
Like that. That's what they do.
I prefer in the Navy. To be honest.
In the Navy was wonderful, wasn't it? Good. We grew up on all that sort of stuff.
Navy.
We used to do it in primary school. Every single morning we had to dance to it.
Why?
We had wake up, shake up in the morning to get us moving and get us healthy.
They played YMCA every morning.
Yeah, we had to dance to YMCA.
Look what's happened to schools.
And go YMCA.
Oh.
Which school was that? What was the name of the school?
Just do that again.
Eton.
What we'll do is we'll clip that for social media.
And tributes to tragic Paul. That's Paul Danan. I don't know why. Yeah, and vaping. Apparently, I don't believe it, but maybe it's from I vape a lot, and loads of people vape a lot.
No, I am 100% with them on this. Andrew will tell you about this thing that he told me about.
Coughed once.
But no, I didn't cough. I took a drag of this vape thing, and it wasn't excessive. Yes. And I'll tell you, I was doubled up in agony.
Yeah, but you're not used to it. If it's like if you smoke one drag, will make you cough your guts out.
I will tell you something. What happened was, it's the liquid expanded in my.
Well, this is the problem. There's something called. We need to look into that. I'm not a medical professional, but something called popcorn lung.
Right.
Yeah, that's the fake news. That doesn't actually exist.
Well, this is what people need to look at. So it is. First of all, it's tragic that you got the death. I'm sure they will look further into it. I saw a good friend, Hayley Palmer, who was very close to him, spoke to him very recently. They're devastated. The guy's in his 40s.
He used to come on tour quite a lot on Sam's show.
Can I tell you? I smoked, right? I used to pull the filters off Marlboro Reds and smoke them the wrong way round,
right?
Because I didn't like filtered cigarettes.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, now different people are different, but the vape had me doubled up in pain, and I tried it again a few other times, and on every occasion.
Yeah, but you got to get used to it. You can't just vape and you'll be all right.
So what we need to do?
That can't be good.
What we need to do until the official report is out is it's pointless speculating, because there's a whole industry this, and you don't want to be sued by the industry. But if there is an issue with vapes, then that needs to be looked at.
You can't defame a whole industry like that.
Well, the thing is, because vapes are vapes are a brand new invention, we do not have the long-term studies. We're not going to find out for 50 years how much these horrible things kill people.
I would suggest, Chloe, here's the problem, and it's precisely what you're saying. I'm not defaming anyone, because I'm not going to say that people are knowingly selling a product that they believe it's incredibly safe. It wasn't safe for me. It really wasn't.
Millions of people are doing it and have given up smoking.
So what we need to do.
The thing is, the data that we have, I can't remember the exact figures, but it shows that there's actually there's barely a difference in the chances of success quitting smoking, vaping versus just going cold turkey. Well, may have worked with you, but
the problem is
I didn't even want to give up smoking, so I didn't do it. I just started doing it.
Scientifically, you shouldn't just use one anecdote.
To be fair, then what we need to do is look at that, get some scientific evidence, so we'll turn around and say this is the cause. We don't know yet. The focus at the moment is it's a tragic loss. This is what's happened. The reasons for his death will no doubt become apparent, and then the questions can be answered in the spotlight of day.
Even putting him to one side, now I take your point. I think there is a debate, isn't there? There's effectively the Asher Gould point, which is, look, this is reducing smoking. There's no doubt that smoking's going down, but also, if you're right, Chloe, and I don't know whether you are, then the reality is what we're now moving people onto is a technology which is safer but probably still, but clearly not as good as doing...
It's an experimental drug. The same people who are like, I definitely wouldn't touch a COVID vaccine because it's not been tested properly, they're on their vape every single day, which is just another experimental drug.
The smoke machines in clubs are the same stuff as the vapes.
Yes.
So we
need to look at, and the abhorrent thing is when they started deliberately appealing to kids and things like that with bubblegum flavours and all these other bits and pieces, brightly coloured stuff.
That's not for kids, though.
No, that's what
I like all the different flavours.
When I was growing up, we used to have those little candy cigarettes.
I remember those.
Do you remember? And there was coconut pretend tobacco. Do you remember that?
Yeah. And that's what got you into the real thing, isn't it? We loved it.
And the whole industry there. I used to have smoking all over the place, and that was what you used to do.
I went out for a fag with Paul Danan outside here about 5 years ago, and he went up to this guy who we got chatting to, who was an actuary at Lloyd's of London, and he went, "Hey mate, have you got a light, mate?" And he went, "I have, and don't call me mate." Anyway, that's
all right. I'll call you.
Rampage of the werewolves. Last story in the Star. There's werewolves that don't go out, especially in the moors at night during a full moon.
Sounds like reliable news.
The Daily Mirror, haunting tragedy of Hollyoaks, Paul, and he was massive. He told me an amazing story once. You know when he won that? Is it Love Island or The Jungle? Tony Soprano. You know what's his name? They asked him, Warner, to take Tony Soprano out.
Right.
And they went to Soho House, and I can't really say what happened, but basically they went in a toilet, and Paul Gandolfini said, "Get out," pushed everyone out, and then pulled out. I can't really say the rest of it. He had a big knife on him. But anyway, it's the first series of Love Island. He was on the Jungle thing as well.
I think we get where that story's going, don't we?
Yeah.
Was it like comic relief? Celebrities walking around with smiles on their face and big red noses.
I think interesting stuff. No, but really tragic. And I think everybody's going to have their story. The fact that actually we're losing so many people so young at the moment. I mentioned Tony Slattery earlier. Yep. He was 65. Okay, so another 20 years on Paul. They're youngsters.
Well, that was addiction to cocaine and ketamine.
Whatever it is, these are human lives, and I think there are people and family and friends who will turn around and be devastated by this news.
A lot of people were devastated about him. You know, he was a brilliant man in his day.
And I always say in 2025, that's what we're going to try and do: build those bridges, because tomorrow the people you've just fallen out with may not be here.
Oh, come on, you delivered that without even reading your notes, right? That is the biggest piece of rhetoric I've ever heard in my life.
Right, the Daily Mirror serious story there. Eliane's life mattered, her legacy will live on. This was a 15-year-old girl who was stabbed. The family of murdered Eliane Andam have vowed to honour her memory by fighting knife crime. But parents Michael and Dorcas said they are crippled with pain over loss of their kind, loving girl, 15, after Hassan Sentamu, 18, was convicted of her murder. Eliane's life mattered. Her legacy will live in our hearts.
How many tragic stories like this are we going to have before Sadiq Khan starts taking this seriously?
He doesn't care.
He
will never take action.
How can any human being with an ounce of heart look at stories like this and just think, I'm the mayor of London, but I'm not going to bother doing anything about it?
Sadiq Khan's view, as far as I can see, is that knife crime is the price you have to pay for community cohesion with the police.
And people are scared, aren't they? You see horrendous... The good thing about social media and so on and so forth, there is some good in that, is that people are now the media. They are reporting things, they're doing action now, they're doing videos showing what's happening on our streets in London and the appalling situation. It needs to be called out and it needs to be stopped, and the police need to basically crack down on it. It is tragic. Yet another young life lost as a result of it.
Sadiq Khan, I saw yesterday at the Mayor's Chamber, what a Reform representative got up and said, we need to all of us work together, form an all-party sort of inquiry. Would you be prepared to work with us? And Sadiq Khan said, oh no, we wouldn't work with Reform. So it doesn't care about the kids' lives. It's all political crap. Anyway, we've got to take a little breaky. Mike Graham's coming up after us, and we'll be back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is the paper
He's
review.
done another Gavolb.
This is the paper review with Andre Walker and Asher Gould, and indeed Andrew Eborn, the barrister and futurist, and Chloe Dobbs, who is a political commentator. Well, I don't know if we're going to call this good news, Asher, but the front page of the Sun.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about where there's a prospect of this earlier. The Sun, the latest edition, Mizen's mum's outrage, lock him up again. And because we were talking about, he's on a licence. Obviously,
let's just explain who this is.
Well, this is the guy that...
This is the rapper 10, who is, in fact, the murderer of Jimmy Mizen. He stabbed the 16-year-old to death and has received a life sentence. He's now out on licence.
After about 14 years.
And whilst being out on licence, he's been rapping about... killing people with a knife.
A rapper unmasked by the Sun as the murderer of Jimmy Mizen faces a return to jail after apparently breaching his licence. John Futurist, 35, spat out vile tracks glorifying violence on drill artist 10, and the BBC promoted him, refused to apologise yesterday as the PM intervened. But we were talking about this earlier. You're out on licence if you get life in prison, even when you get out. So, and could you be recalled? And it's looked like something
exactly. And we raised this point. And what I love is that our viewers and watchers and listeners around the world are responding. We've had something from Andrew in Salisbury, who said, "Great show tonight." Andrew Eborn, whoever he is, was spot on about the rap music scene. BBC is not to blame, but the rap scene has had its own blasphemy law for decades. And this is the point that we were making, is if you look at the language of some of these songs and you dissect it, it is appalling. What we need to look at is put that into perspective and say, look, what are we doing on that sort of basis? What's happening to our society that we permit this, and people are listening to it and responding?
But I remember, Chloe, there was the rap band SMS, who literally were rapping about how they hoped Osama bin Laden would kill British people. I mean, Andrew's right. There are extreme examples, but your average rap song is pretty violent. Also, Andrew earlier listed some of the people that have been convicted of serious criminality. But, you know, this man, and it's got it all. How is this man dealing with a probation officer who says, "Oh, I'll tell you what, I think what you really should be is appearing on the BBC rapping about killing someone with a knife"?
I mean, this is just absolutely ludicrous, and I can't believe that we've seen there that the BBC are refusing to apologise for this. You know, at least
they won't play "Freezing This Christmas."
I know
but they will play.
"Freezing This Christmas" is apparently too controversial because it criticises Starmer, but apparently glorifying the murder of a young boy is acceptable to the BBC. They've got no issue with the kind of words that are used in rap songs, but they get all sensitive about the words you use when you're talking about Hamas, a terrorist organisation.
For those watching, we can see him, and this is yesterday's Sun. It's not the front page, but you know, he's sat on a yellow Lamborghini with a balaclava on. This is from his rap music video. You know, this guy is at best somebody who's not been rehabilitated at all in prison. He should not be walking the street.
And there was a case, I can't remember the lady's name, but she was put in prison for sharing a friend had died, and she shared on Facebook the lyrics of their favourite rap song, and she got done and put in prison for the lyrics of that rap song.
Because the N-word was in it, but it was just...
rather than the person that actually wrote the song. And I think they're not being given any accountability, these rappers, for the lyrics that they use.
And they should. And as I say, there's the general point about that sort of stuff. For the interest of balance, we should say what the BBC said. What the BBC said to Mail Online: the song lyrics you've put to us have not been played on the BBC. Decisions on music are made on a case-by-case basis, and we have strict editorial guidelines in place before any content is broadcast or posted. BBC One Extra does not glamorise violence, and this individual does not feature on any playlist.
But the whole of rap does. I mean, since Ice-T and NWA, Cop Killer and all language. It's always been glamorising and glorifying violence and killing people.
Just as Andrew in Salisbury said, are they with us that we need to look at this in terms of playing this sort of music, these sort of lyrics to our youngsters who are impressionable?
But can you ban art? Can you ban art?
But hang on a second. I think we've missed a fundamental point here, which is, right, if somebody has committed, I don't know, shoplifting, and they had to be out on licence, yes. I appreciate that that's not the way it really works, and they literally started rapping about how much they love shoplifting and plan to do it in the future, then you would say that person remains a risk of shoplifting. This man, first of all, is not a dreamer. This man has murdered a 16-year-old and has been convicted. There's no doubt about that. If he is rapping about the fact that he loves knife crime, that he's pleased to have killed someone, and that essentially the pleasure of killing him features in the lyrics. I would say to you that that man is going to commit a crime again, and that crime is murder.
And it's insightful as well.
It's very simple. If it's a breach of the licence terms, then you go back inside. That happens with everybody, but we need clarity. And also what needs to happen is we must act very, very quickly on this.
Thank you so much. Well, to those of you listening on Friday morning, Mike Graham is just up in a couple of moments. Thank you so much for listening to this broadcast from Andre and Asha. And 0344
good morning.
499 1000 is the number to call. And so I guess we'll wish you good morning and hand you over to Mike Graham. For those of you watching on and listening on Thursday night, we're going to be taking your calls in a couple of moments. Are you staying? You're not staying with us, are you?
Well, I turned into a pumpkin at midnight, but I love the calls, so I'm going to rush home and listen to them.
Oh, okay. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Chloe, you're going to go as well, aren't you?
You've got your new show coming up, though. Remind us about that Channel 4, the documentary. What's it?
Channel 4, yes. We haven't got the official release date. It's called Go Back to Where You Came From. Very
and she went to Syria, Mogadishu, and it's all about life there. And you nearly got bombed, not by the Turks.
That is the best mistake ever.
Actually, it's both.
Leave it in. Oh my God, that is one for the real.
No, but they both nearly happened.
There's no military age men. Don't worry, it was never a real risk. They're all here. Don't worry about it. My God,
my Freudian slip.
Asha has broken the network, ladies and gentlemen. We will just recover and be back in a moment.
Right.